And we will get straight into it. There's only one thing. Well, there's plenty of things from this one thing to talk about this evening. Myself, Freddie, Cardi, and Daisy Goodhand looking back on Arsenal's 1-0 defeat to Chelsea. Guro Reiten's 84th minute penalty. The difference, both games between Chelsea and Arsenal this season have been decided by just one goal. But I mean, it's quite remarkable to think how much Arsenal have come, and still, again, they've left Stamford Bridge with so little, from when you compare it to that defeat at the Emirates. How do you compare the two games, Daisy, firstly? I'm quite interested to start with that in terms of Arsenal losing 2-1 at the Emirates when, they were down and out after losing 5-2 to Bayern Munich, and then losing to them at Stamford Bridge, by a penalty that I think we're okay to say is controversial.
Yeah.
No one's going to say, I don't think Chelsea fans are going to say it's a stonewall penalty. I think you can see why there's the argument on both sides. But the fact that both defeats on paper were narrow, but in the games themselves maybe have panned out quite differently.
Yeah.
Arsenal have given Chelsea two games this season, even though they've started both really poorly.
Yeah, I think you can look at it from kind of two perspectives, like the team and obviously from a fan perspective as well. I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to mindset. I remember kind of being sat there at the Emirates, very much thinking, as awful as it sounds going into it, how many are we going to concede? And that was kind of the mindset that we were at that point. It was hard to be positive. Obviously, we still backed the team completely. We sang throughout and we did yesterday as well. But it definitely felt like a whole different challenge going into yesterday's game. And I think very different performances. There was still, I think, an element potentially in Arsenal's performance of maybe a bit of kind of nerves or anxiety about performing against Chelsea. We saw moments where, Leah Williamson was a bit nervy at the back and Arsenal looked like they couldn't get out. That's credit to Chelsea as well. But I definitely think it's a game, even though it's kind of a similar scoreline in terms of the one goal margin, I think a very different game in terms of mindset. Arsenal seemed up for it at so many different points. There was a period where as fans we felt like Chelsea were a little bit rattled on the pitch. There was a few moments where Kathleen McCabe did a few slide tackles and all of a sudden it felt like Arsenal we're gonna get something out of that game. I know a lot of people talking about the typical problem that Arsenal seem to be having is taking those chances. It's coming back to bite them on so many occasions. We saw Marnham put one over, Mead had a good chance, McCabe was through with a fantastic ball over the top from Cooney Cross. So Arsenal definitely, and same with Chelsea, they didn't take the chances either, and it did come down to those fine margins. But the one positive I think that if there is one to take, is I don't think we went into it as negatively as we did the first time. But again, it's still frustrating because the only way that Arsenal could have really come out of that game happy was with 3 points.
Yeah, it feels like a reality check, doesn't it? And we always knew
Yeah.
this would come under Rene Slagers. We obviously hoped that Arsenal would put up a good show, and for large parts they did against Chelsea. But of course, that is still going to hurt, and it's going to hurt Rene Slagers as well because she's had 3 months where she's got this team, into a good position. And for so many of us, the win over Bayern Munich, even though that wasn't easy, was proof actually Arsenal can mix it with the big teams under Rene
Yeah.
Slagers. And obviously they've started the year with those wins over Crystal Palace and Brighton, but this was just such a different game. And I think certainly mentality when you go to Chelsea, that you really see that there's an arrogance, there's a swagger about Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. There's bringing Naomi Girma out because you know what, the back four and goalkeeper we've got have kept a clean sheet, but next time you play us, look who you might be coming up
Yeah.
against. One of the best centre backs, if not the best centre back in the world, right? That's flexing your muscles right before taking on a team in a game that could essentially wrap up the title. And Chelsea are very good at that. Quite subtly very good at that. And I'm not saying bringing Naomi Girma out in the pouring rain, it is quite, quite the reason why they've won the game. But once you're at Stamford Bridge, I think Arsenal also will have had bad memories from Stamford Bridge, even, the same for Kings Meadow as well. And this isn't a comparison or a criticism of the Emirates, but I think there is just something about, that mentality and the feeling you get around the place, the confidence that Chelsea have, even just from, the staff members who work there and everything. It is a club who are used to winning and used to winning these big games. And you can tell the way they celebrated after as well. They know how massive a step is. And again, that's testament to Arsenal. But I think it's just further proof of what Chelsea have over Arsenal at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a it's a very difficult thing to kind of compare. I think obviously I haven't been Stamford Bridge as a fan too much, but it definitely seems like so frustrating that Chelsea can continuously do this no matter who that the manager is, no matter who the players are. You know, they move players on. We talk like they've talked about that so much, kind of letting those legends go, and they've brought in other replacements, and they've not been sentimental in any way, shape, or form. They're building a club that is good at playing football, that wants to win trophies, that has won trophies. You know, it's not about keeping players to make the fans happy. I think it's a very different. If you look at Chelsea and Arsenal, you know, two very good teams, but it's very different in the way that we're ran. You know, Arsenal prioritise kind of that feel of supporters, you know, getting behind, you know, singing, chanting, getting behind the players, really building a family feel to the club. And Chelsea have prioritised dominance, you know, confidence, building a team of the best players in the world, no matter what the price is. I think there's a very big difference in that, and it depends kind of where you sit on what you believe is more important. Chelsea seem to be building the attendances, like we, you know, they got a good number of people there, but the atmosphere wasn't there. So it's kind of similar in the way to what you talk about with Arsenal and Meadow Park. Like you go there and it feels like the opposition has got no chance because of the atmosphere. I definitely think Chelsea just do it on the pitch. That's where it comes out, you know, from the, like you said, from the second that the game kicked off, the first 10, 15 minutes, I was hiding behind somebody, you know, thinking I can't watch this because they're going to score so early on and it's going to knock Arsenal back and we're not going to bounce back from this. We've seen very little of Renee Slagers in those big games. You know, we've seen her take on Bayern Munich. Yes, that was a game that had a huge, you know, consequences, huge magnitude, and we did it, but that was at Meadow Park. So it's a different challenge now. Going to these big clubs, you know, if we're going to a big club away in the Champions League, how are we going to manage that? How are we going to cope with that? We can't just rely on, you know, the fans and Meadow Park and everything like that because there's more to it. It's the players that we're thinking about buying. It's the team we're thinking about building. It's the depth of the squad, and Chelsea seem to have that nailed. And I do think that that's where Arsenal are falling behind.
Yeah, it's interesting as well with Chelsea this season. Obviously, the success Emma Hayes has had, but nobody seems to be going out and going, "Oh, Sonia Bonpastor's done amazingly." You know, look at what she's changed. Look at, you know, and I'm sure that analysis is out there, but it doesn't feel like she gets the praise. It just
Yeah,
feels like Chelsea turn up and do what Chelsea do, and I feel like as well with Arsenal, you know, nobody's gone, you know, like Renee Sagers, this isn't good enough. We needed this, this, and this. People have accepted that the resources are so much stronger on one side than they are on the other side, and that if Renee had a little bit more to be able to bring off the bench, a little bit more to work with in the squad, that you would have liked to think Arsenal produce a better performance and give Chelsea more of a game, you know, in those closing stages. But, you know, if you're Sonia Bonpastor and you think, oh, who am I going to, you know, bring on to turn this game around when you've already got a 7 point lead at the top of the WSL, and the first name that springs to mind is Lauren James. You know, obviously they brought Hermano on as well, but you know that again, that was the difference yesterday. And there was a key moment when, you know, when Caitlin Ford came off. She's had a really good season, and I looked down at the bench and said, purely as wingers, have we got an out and out winger who is going to come on? Now, Rosa Kafaji for me is more of a number 10. I think
yeah,
we've seen what she can do. She's very raw on the wing. Um, and then it's Mariona Caldente, who was probably marked out of the game at times in the number 10 role, doesn't have maybe the pace that Caitlin Ford does, or you move Alessia Russo to right wing as they did, and that's moving a player who's banging the goals in the number 9 role out now into a more unfamiliar position. That's the difference for me. You know, one
yeah.
team has this incredible depth on the bench and has more to come later on in the season, and the other seems to be just getting by with what they've got and, you know, scratching and scraping around a little bit. And I think maybe that's a consequence of not being able to keep a whole squad happy, maybe in the last couple of seasons under Jonas Eidevall. You know, I'm not saying there are players who have left that, you know, could you keep them in the rotation? Could they keep bringing more? But I think Arsenal have struggled, and we're going to see this if Laura Wienreuter has left. They struggle to keep players who aren't regular starters happy. But
Yeah.
at Chelsea, you know, there is this ability, because you know you're part of this sort of winning machine, that actually you can play really well. You can still get dropped to the bench and you can come on and have that impact. And I just think when you look at those two squads, certainly the two starting lineups will give each other a game. But what Chelsea brought off the bench, that was decisive for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree with you more. That is the narrative that I think we have to be looking at, and that is the difference, I think, in why we can't compete in the way that Chelsea can. I do think that Chelsea don't get enough credit as a club for that. You know, the way that they've managed that squad. Yes, certain players
It's a
have
huge
left.
squad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, there's so many players in and out as well, like club legends leaving, big players leaving who you would say, why are you letting them go? I thought that with Pernilla Hard, I thought that with Ericsson, I've thought that with, the likes of these players who've been there in such a solid part. And then you think, well, that's because actually I can bring in, Natalie Bjorn, I can bring in Germo, I can replace these players, get them to play to the same level and succeed in it, and nobody is unhappy. And I think, top managers are able to do that. Emma Hayes did that. I think Sonia's doing that. I think it reminds me a lot of kind of watching the Lionesses at the Euros. Serena Wiegmann, she had that squad, and yes, it's easier in kind of tournament football, but nobody kind of sulked. Nobody thought, okay, if I'm not going to play, then that means I'm not important. It's about that. I want to see now that Renee Slagers can do that. It's too early to decide if she can because she's not, like we say, she's not really had a transfer window. She's not even had a full season. She's coming in, mopping up the mistakes that were made at the start of the season. She's already behind in the race. She started 5 steps behind everyone else. So that's really interesting, I think, is to see if she's able to do that. If that's something that her management style really, something she really considers is being able to build a squad where everyone understands their role, everyone stays, she can get those contracts sorted out as well, and also just not be a little bit afraid to let people go where necessary. Prioritize big players coming in, important players coming in, having a lot of squad depth, but also keeping other people happy as well. And the Veen Reuter thing is a huge one for me. I'm really disappointed in the way that was handled because if she does exit the club, obviously we don't know anything just yet. That means Emily Fox is our only right back, and you
Yeah.
cannot expect Emily Fox to perform, stay fit, and perform at the top level in every single minute of 4 competitions across the season. It's just not right, and we saw what Veen could do kind of prior to her injury. It's a shame that she hasn't really been given a chance, and if she does exit, then I think are Arsenal just trying to raise funds for the next player that they buy, and are we kind of not on the same level in that sense as Chelsea, willing to spend the money regardless?
Yeah, I think a massive part of it is, when you're at an elite squad, you're going to have elite players who don't play the minutes they want to, but that's because there are even more elite players in front of them. And, credit to the players who want to go on and get more football. But, you have to make sure that player who is going to be coming on is almost at the standard of the ones, if not better, of the ones who are starting. You cannot afford now to risk an injury to Emily Fox and then a Katie Reid, 18 years of age again, who's a centre back
Yeah.
more than anything, to then be your cover because you weren't able, and again, it's not under Renee Slagers. I think, we look at the players who've left under Jonas Eidevall are sort of all due to a lack of minutes, and frustration, a lack of opportunities, and even things like sorting out loan deals. But again, with the January transfer window, you look at when Arsenal gave Renee Slagers the job. And if they could have done that after the Bayern Munich game and the amount of extra time you have then in the January transfer window for her to know taking the team forward, for players who are still contact to know who the manager is. Because if you phone me and I say, well, who am I going to be working under? And we go, oh, I've no idea.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be as likely to take the job. It's as simple as that. And also the players who are at the squad who are going to be going, well, maybe I might leave in January, but I might wait until we know who the manager is. Again, to taking this time, there's never a good time to appoint a manager, but when you could have done it earlier than you can, of course, in hindsight, the fact it's Slagers who has continued, we can look and say, well, you could have just given it to her months ago. But to actually take your time with that appointment in a crucial month in terms of recruitment, Arsenal have taken their eye off the ball here in terms of the squad. But
Yeah.
also, Renee Slagers now only has a few days to say, look, I could really do with this, and I could have really done with doing this a few weeks ago, earlier in January. There's just a few factors here that just don't sit right with me. And look, we've agreed that Renee Slagers is the right decision. Of course we have. But has she been backed as best as she could be in the time she's been in charge? And will she be backed by the end of the transfer window? And also, what sway does she have now after the club appoint her to go, look, I really need this? Is she going to be brave and say, I need these positions? Are Arsenal going to, take action? Because yeah, it's really hard. Those are my thoughts anyway. I can talk all day, but I think the general consensus is, and I don't think Arsenal needed to look at Chelsea to realise their squad isn't quite full enough. But I think that has now proven that certainly there are too many positions where Arsenal don't have enough depth and potentially enough quality coming on.
Yeah, and I think like what is interesting is because it feels so contradictory to what we say, and at the same time, somehow it manages to be both sides. I think we've looked at this transfer window and in recent years, and we've thought, oh, fantastic, they went in for the players that they really wanted to avoid other clubs getting them. They persuaded the likes of Kyra Cooney-Cross, Rosa Kafaji, Mariona to join. That's huge, and there's no downplaying that at all. They have been willing to go out there and get the player that they want, but they've also let great players go because of issues with wages and things like that. They've also not they've kind of rushed it now, and when you can see Chelsea, you are looking at these other clubs because they are in competition with you. You're looking at them coming in and saying, are they going to get Germa? Yes, they are going to get Germa. This is going to be unveiled, at such a huge event. And now Arsenal are going to go, right, if we need these players, they've got to come in a couple of days. And it's really rushed and it looks desperate. And it just doesn't look like they had it figured out. We saw the saga with Kira Walsh. That was maybe out of Arsenal's control a little bit. But it doesn't always feel the most sort of organised and reassuring when you see Arsenal making these transfers. And they don't have the same sort of confidence that Chelsea do when they go into it. I mean, I've seen sort of reports that Germa had turned down higher wages, turned down more opportunity at Lyon that she was getting, even though they were willing to match that because she wanted to join Chelsea. Arsenal can convince players to join Arsenal. We've seen that. It's a challenge for a lot of people. It's a great club. It's up and coming. But a lot of the time, I think recruitment is done poorly, and contracts are done poorly, and I think it's something Arsenal have to be considering if they want to keep the likes of these big players at the club, if they want to be able to continue to attract new targets, and also if they want to back Renee Slagers as well.
I think we've said it earlier in the season as well when Jonas Eidevall was sort of asked about not bringing in a winger, and he said about the financial constraints and what he had to work with. But he was saying that during a time when Arsenal had been linked with Kira Walsh and putting these record numbers on the table, and people were just saying, this doesn't add up. So we've known for a while in terms of the limitations to the squad depth. We've known wingers, would be a priority, and it's just not been fulfilled. And we're not talking about a young sort of a front four as well. We're talking about players who've played a lot of football, players who are all established, regular players, almost some of them first names on the team sheet for their countries as well. And that's obviously going to be the case when you're in Arsenal's position. But I think when you want to compete in all four competitions, you need this big squad as well, and Arsenal should be used to this. But I saw Alex Scott joking with Naomi Girma about how Arsenal would sort of sent her to, try and persuade her. I don't know, obviously, how much truth there is in that, but Arsenal can't bank on the fact that they can take a player to a game and that they'll fall in love and, want to join anymore. Because I think if you're Naomi Gurmit, you can be wooed by Arsenal all you like, but Chelsea have won 5 WSL titles in a row. And I don't want to make the whole podcast about praising Chelsea because I still think come back to this discussion, in a few months' time next season when Renee Slagers has had more time and Arsenal have got a few more signings in, let's let Arsenal prove their commitment to her because, this is the person they've thrown their weight behind, and let her make her own signings and build her own squad in what little time essentially now she has to do it. One thing I do want to touch on with Chelsea is we talk about that the sort of high intensity start. They're such a good physical side, particularly at home. You look at the spine of the team: Millie Bright, Natalie Bjorn, Erin Cuthbert, and Nusken will get stuck in, and then Ramirez up front. But Baltimore, I thought, I've never seen Emily Fox come under duress like that in the opening exchanges of a game. But Baltimore bullied her, in those first 10-15 minutes. You don't often see that, but Rene and Alessia Russo both talked about, it's going to be a game of slide tackles, it's going to be a physical game. But you just sense that Chelsea were bang up for it, at Stamford Bridge yesterday. I'm not saying Arsenal weren't, but I just think they won that physical battle throughout, Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. The mentality was there, and I think I saw an interview with Erin Cuthbert prior to I don't think it was this game, but it was recently following obviously their draw with Leicester, and you could see amongst the players and especially her and the key figures in the side how much that made them realise, okay, that's the mentality that they have. They drew a game with Leicester. They're still unbeaten, yet the fact they didn't win had been such a big deal to them, and it was so important to them that they went on and improved and then proved them wrong following that. Because obviously all the narrative around Chelsea, I think, is always quite negative. You know, the second they draw to Leicester, it makes the headlines. Yet
Yeah.
when they go 10 games prior or whatever it was without being beaten, it's hardly mentioned, and it's quite a frustrating one. But yeah, absolutely yesterday. And I also think flipping that round to what you said, in terms of nullifying Arsenal, they absolutely nailed that. You know, someone had done their homework on Arsenal. Mariona was in the 10 and was marked out of the game. Russo was completely up front on her own. It felt like there was no flow between. I thought Kyra was probably one of our best players and
Yeah.
has been in a lot of recent games. She got her praise a lot yesterday. You know, that ball over the top for McCabe. There's definitely bright sparks in the Arsenal side. But looking at the game against Brighton, you know, I went to that game. I saw what Mariona did. I saw what, you know, these impact players have done coming into the game. Emily Fox even, and in that game, Chelsea just completely nullified that. I was interested in why Rene didn't think about Mariona coming out wide for a portion of the game, seeing she was so sort of marked out of the game in the midfield, and then having Russo kind of it, you know, more of that central role with Stina Blackstenius, with the options that we had coming off the bench were not all there. I don't
Yeah.
think that the subs made much of an impact in the game. In fact, I thought there was times where there was frustration from the away end. You know, there was moments where Marnham lost the ball, Stina lost the ball, and we just lost that when Ford came off. And like you say, that's down to squad depth, but also Chelsea just had that nailed completely. They knew what the threats were in that Arsenal side, and they completely stopped that. They were only really caught out when a ball went in over the top, which Arsenal didn't even try at all during that sort of second half, which
Yeah.
surprised me. So interesting that we didn't switch it up at certain times to kind of try and catch them out. But I do think a lot of that is our lack of squad depth and what you could, I guess you could say, super subs not really having the impact that was intended.
Yeah, really good point. Because what do Chelsea not like? What do those fullbacks not like? And the centre backs, balls in behind,
Yeah,
being outpaced, being outrun in behind. You know, we saw it at Leicester being hit on the counter attack. Arsenal had joy midway through that first half when they looked to go a little bit more direct and they
yeah,
were less afraid, as you say, people like Kyra and even Katie with those long switches out from defence. When they looked to put it on Chelsea a bit more, running behind and force mistakes, you know, Russo probably had that best chance where if she went centrally instead of trying to go around Millie Bright, then you'd have really backed her to stick it away. But that just seemed to wear thin as the second half went on because also, you know, there were tired legs out there, but there were players who just didn't offer that pace because Arsenal don't have that. They don't have
yeah.
that pace to run in behind and to get onto long balls. And I just think in terms of if you look at how best to hurt Chelsea, I just don't think Arsenal had the players, you know, quite set up to do it yesterday. And you look at the subs that came on as well. You know, Russo moving across to right wing. She probably did inject a bit of pace. She was the one picking up the ball in her own half and driving it forward. But that's a player who scored 6 goals in a row in the WSL. Do you want
Yeah.
to move her out wide onto the right wing? So again, Arsenal have to improvise. They're going to have to continue improvising now. McCabe is suspended, and you know things like that, and depending on Ford's fitness too. So the squad, you know, is wearing a bit thin, but also there's not many players out injured. This is what Arsenal have got to
Yeah.
work with. And I don't think Lena Hurtig comes on and runs in behind and causes that many problems on the left wing yesterday as well. So I think simply player wise, Chelsea were just able to match Arsenal. You know, there wasn't a lot of that X factor in the Arsenal side that could have really hurt Sonia Bompastor's team, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I mentioned yesterday when I was discussing this with somebody was the subs that were made. Obviously, I don't even think we made all of the subs. I'm not sure if we did. I know Lotta came on for a little bit, but I do think part of that was
Just
definitely to do with the card decision. But if you think about it in terms of prior to that, the red card and prior to the penalty, I remember looking at the Emirates when we beat Chelsea 4-1, and one of the key things was Leah Volti had played a ball over the top for Russo to run into. And I'm thinking players who are good on the ball have to be in this game. We've seen Kyra in this game, fantastic. You know, we've seen the likes of McCabe obviously prior to getting sent off. You know, you've seen Leah Williamson. She could have maybe been brought in to kind of step into midfield. I know that feels a bit desperate, but in terms of, you know, just switching it up, doing something different like that, I think Arsenal obviously lack that a lot at times, and Chelsea are willing to do that. We saw that the Lauren James. I mean, I hate to keep praising Chelsea in this way on an Arsenal podcast, but he came on and it was like, right, what the hell do we do now? There's nothing we can do about this. We can't stop her, and she was fantastic. So Arsenal just don't have that at the moment, and if they maybe they do have that, but they're not kind of giving these players the chance to get to that level to be able to have an impact to be able to be impactful in that way. But I was interested why certain substitutions weren't made, and I think maybe it's either a case of the car decision impacted that or things like that. But it always feels kind of a bit like an excuse because Arsenal need that impact from the bench, and we just don't have it really.
Well, the subs that didn't come on, Manny Zinsberger, Laura Wienreuter, Laia Cadena, Katie Reed, Leah Valti.
Yeah,
There's not really anything. Again, what Arsenal needed in this game was a quick, direct winger. What
yeah,
Arsenal need this season, what they need in the transfer window is a quick, direct winger, and it's just not that profile in the squad, and probably other areas as well, but predominantly that. I think if you're an Arsenal fan making that recruitment list, I think that is going to be top. And whether the club can deliver it, we will wait and see. Look, I'm sure there'll be Chelsea fans who have tuned in anyway, hoping to see us absolutely lose our minds over the penalty. So let's get that out the way
yeah,
before we go on to the red card. First viewing, I think everyone said that's clumsy from Kim Little. It is a foul, it is a penalty. Slowing the replays down, a bit of zooming in. Look, Little did get something on the ball. She also did get a lot of Lauren James. You can see. Let's just start with this. In real time, as the referee, you can
yeah.
see why Emily Heaslip has pointed to the spot, because in real time, watching that, it looks like a nailed on pen, because the contact on the ball, it does, you can tell the deviation when you watch the replay, but if
Yeah.
you're a referee watching that in full speed, you can see why that's being given.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us to talk about the penalty, we're going to have to separate it from the refereeing decisions in general and just treat it as its own because we obviously anyone, even Chelsea fans, neutrals watching that said that was not that was not the best refereeing performance they've ever seen. Let's just say that. But the penalty decision, yeah, absolutely. In normal time, even we watched it very quickly on somebody's phone on replay. Like you say, in normal time that should have been given, and I'm still quite convinced that it is a penalty. I mean, slow anything down, it looks bad. You've seen that with many red card decisions that have been given, especially in in the men's game and things like that. A lot of the time when you slow it down, it looks 10 times worse. And is that kind of the decisions that you want to give? Maybe not. So I still sit on the fence, but I do understand the penalty and I wouldn't argue against that like strongly and say that it wasn't a penalty. But I do think, yeah, the real decisions were elsewhere. I think we couldn't even count on, two hands the amount of decisions that I think were wrong. There was moments where Beth Mead was on the counter attack and was pulled down by the back of his shirt. No yellow card was given. We can talk about the red card obviously in a moment, but I do think in general we know what kind of referee performance to have expected. You can judge them based on previous games. But yeah, I don't think that helped Arsenal in any way. And a game of such magnitude as well. I think when you're playing derbies or games that might be considered as title race games. I'm not saying we were, but those big games where big rivals play, you've got to have a referee that can hold their own and can keep their head on. And I think that really just wasn't there yesterday at all.
Well, the first yellow card for a foul was in the 90th minute when Erin Cuthbert clattered Steph Catley. She was nearly sat next to me writing my match report because she was absolutely sent into the sort of down towards the advertising hoardies. But it's just consistency, isn't it? And obviously you can be consistent in not giving things. And I like, it is, I think it's definitely an English thing in terms of it's a derby game, let the game flow. There's going to be some bad tackles. But, we're getting to a stage where actually player safety is just not being looked after because there
Yeah,
there were some really cynical fouls and some again we've got different ends of the spectrum here in that in the Arsenal men's game on Saturday you've got the easiest cynical yellow card foul ever and it's been given a red card
yeah.
and we've seen a load of easy cynical fouls yesterday and nothing's been given so it just seems like the referees are almost overcomplicating things. And actually, if you see a cynical foul, if you see someone taking one for the team, it's just a yellow card. And players know they're going to be booked, and they probably deserve to be booked when they make these fouls. That's why they're the cynical fouls. And yeah, I completely agree. The interesting thing for me now is that penalty is more decisive than the red card. But
Yeah.
the red card is probably going to be talked about more because you look at the fact, there was still 6 minutes left. I think it was 6 minutes of added time in the end, even though the red card has probably generated a couple of those minutes. If Arsenal do, throw everything at Chelsea with 11 players, with Katie McCabe still on the pitch, sort of pushing someone like her forward, they're in with more of a chance than they'd have with 10 players. That's for sure. Um, but I've got to get your take on the red card because it's irresponsible by a senior player. I
Yeah,
think to do what she's done, we can see if you're a lip reader, you can have some educated guesses. I've got a rough idea of what's been said to Emily Heaslip and what, in my understanding, has been said twice to Emily Heaslip, and that's led her, giving a booking. Well, I think once you're booked and you continue to ask for more,
yeah,
I think you have to take responsibility there. But to continue doing that and not get a second booking but get sent off, that's you've got to have said something quite bad to get a straight red card for foul language. I just think it's irresponsible. Fair enough, you complaining about the penalty, but to continue doing it and do it in that manner, you can tell the way she's turned and sort of moved her head towards Emily Heaslip. It's not good enough, and I think you're seeing McCabe's teammates. I think words would have been said afterwards. I think Renee Slager's handled it well in the press conference, but you could tell the reaction on the pitch from the Arsenal players that they were furious, and I think the fans were as well. And look, we love Katie McCabe for what she does, and this has always sort of been a part of her game, but that's overstepping the line. And I know people will say, "Oh, she's done it before," but to lose your head like that after being booked, it's just not good enough for Arsenal. And I think Renee Slager's. I think there might have been some meetings going on, this morning, getting into the office and sitting her down and saying what's gone on there.
yeah. And I think what maybe sort of disguised it at the time and maybe made her get away with it, especially in the away end, was the performance from the referee in general. I think obviously, that is football. The referee decisions don't go your way always. And I mentioned to you when we had this initial conversation, going into a game of this magnitude, there's no way that Arsenal hadn't looked at the referee, hadn't looked at her previous performances, didn't know what she was like as a referee. She's given cards on many occasions. I think it was her that gave the Alex Greenwood Lauren Hemp double in a Manchester City game. You know what to expect. And I actually went into the game before and I said, "Oh my God, Katie McCabe's going to end up getting sent off." And the irony of that coming now and actually happening, I couldn't believe it when I was watching it, because it is silly by by every means it is, because you know what a referee like that is going to do. She isn't going to just brush it, she's not going to just brush it off. If you say something like that to a referee, you are going to get punished. She obviously reacts a lot in the moment. That is the kind of player that you're getting, but when you're expecting her to be one of those senior figures, like you say, who is I think in some way, sometimes given the captain's armband, it's, you need more of a calm head in that moment. And I think it's a silly decision. And obviously, she comes off the pitch. I think there's been a clip of her coming off saying it's not good enough from any of you, to the whole officiating team. Well, that's, you can think what you think. You can come out after the game and think that, walking around the pitch saying whatever you want. But in the moment, when it's such a game where it's still 0-0, obviously the penalty had been given, but there was still something to play for. Like you say, I think you've really got to keep your head there, and it's disappointing because maybe there could have been something in that game for Arsenal, like you say. So yeah, I guess you can kind of play devil's advocate in a way that the officiating was poor, but that doesn't excuse language of that severity, and also the magnitude of the situation. It's something I think it has to be worked on. It has to be considered. It's about the team and what the team needs in that moment, and you can't always just lose your head and expect it to be okay and expect it to be accepted.
Yeah, I think once you lean in towards a
Yeah,
referee and basically scream in her face and scream something that wasn't particularly nice, I think maybe you don't expect to be sent off for it, but as you say, do your research on the referee. We know teams include this in presentations. Now when they analyze opponents, they'll also look at the referee. And we knew what Emily Heaslip is like, and I don't want to criticize her because I think we've had enough refereeing criticism this weekend, but we know what she is like as a referee. What was the reaction like in the away end at the time? Obviously, as you say, more anger towards the referee. How do you feel like that's developed as people have seen replays of the incident and I guess more information has come to light? And how do you think Renee Slager's handled it in the press conference?
yeah, I think in terms of the away end, obviously, before that, there were decisions that were going against us that were really frustrating. Like I say, in a game of that magnitude, obviously we're riled up. We're playing Chelsea. We don't like them. We want to kind of get the most out of that game that we possibly can. We know what's on the line as well. It's not just any other game against Chelsea. In fact, many were admitting we lose this game and we lose we hand Chelsea the title race. It feels crazy to say that, in January, but it's true. And I think straight away, obviously, in the moment of the heat of the moment, you kind of get mad at the referee. We backed Kimmy as well. Obviously, these things happen with the penalty, but I think we sort of sang Katie McCabe's chant as she went off the pitch because we didn't know it was the other end where we were sat. We didn't know what was going on, but in hindsight, it was a penalty and it was a red card, so it's quite difficult to react like to what's happening in the moment. You don't really get to see a replay either, which you're looking at it off on someone's tiny screen trying to figure out what had happened. But it was obviously just pure adrenaline and anger in the moment. But obviously coming back and looking at it again, you can understand that. What you can't understand is how poor the officiating is in general in this league. It's not just the first time this has happened. It's impacting games, it's impacting title races, it's impacting positions and points dropped and things like that. So that's kind of where the frustration lies now, I think. And yeah, obviously we've praise Renee Slagers a lot in general for how she's handled things. I think she's a very calm figure. She's not going to come out and turn against a player or react in the moment. I do think that's never going to happen, but I think obviously it's not something that we can just ignore. Kind of it plays a big part in the team and how the team perform and going forward. We can't just keep accepting it, in my opinion, just because that's what she's like as a player, kind of thing. It's bigger than that, and it's a team game, and that can impact us and it can impact results and ultimately our season as a whole. So you worry what would happen in big games and big finals if you want Arsenal to get there, if players can't keep their cool. The Chelsea are going to torment us. They are going to play to the advantage of the referee being on their side, so to say. So you've got to be able to handle those moments. And I think there's so many players in that Arsenal team that can. But should we be starting to consider taking players off because they can't, handle that? I don't know if that's something that you agree with, or if that's something that should be explored and try to improve that side of a player's, performance and play style.
Yeah, I think there'll be certainly by the look of the teammates who weren't particularly happy. I think there will have been some harsh conversations happening as well because you want to rely on players, and Katie McCabe gives everything for Arsenal. And I don't want to say in what she did yesterday, she's not giving everything for Arsenal, but it's interesting how sometimes, it's the same at my non-league club. One of the players who was almost a banker, if you were to put a bet on getting sent off, is the oldest player in the team and the
Yeah.
most experienced, but he still has these moments, where you get that rush of blood to the head and, of course everyone could get it, but you have to be able to control that because now Arsenal, who've had Steph Catley and Leah Williamson do so well at centre back, they now travel to Manchester City on Sunday. Catley will have to move out probably to left back, and you bring someone in at centre back. And I'm not saying how that's massively costly because I'm a big fan of obviously Lotte Wubben-Moy or Laia Kadina who you bring back in, but you have needlessly then disrupted that for another big game. Get sent off for 6 minutes away to Chelsea is not great, but then further down the line, you can excuse Bristol City. She may well have got, rested anyway. But now this is where Renee Sayers will be frustrated. What have we not touched on? I guess the title race. I think everyone's gone. That's it, done and dusted, given the trophy in January. But I mean, Arsenal have dropped to fourth now, Daisy, 10 points behind Chelsea. Everyone's played the same number of games. Chelsea 34 points, Manchester United 27, Man City 25, and Arsenal 24. So Arsenal could go back up to second with a win over Manchester City on Sunday. I feel like with City and United, probably you would back Arsenal to to get back to their best. They've got a nice run of fixtures after they do play Manchester City away as well, and I don't think either City or United, as well as they have done, certainly City really haven't set the world on fire, and we've seen the defensive mistakes that Manchester City were making even in that Aston Villa game. So I think that's one where Arsenal will back themselves to go up there and once again cause City some real problems. But for me, almost, if Arsenal draw that game 0-0, I think the title is probably still over. I think Arsenal have to win that game, close the gap to 4 points, certainly for them to have any hope of causing Chelsea some problems. So almost, yes, if Arsenal fans are getting annoyed about the penalty decision, getting annoyed about losing. But I don't feel like a 0-0 draw changes all that much either in the
Yeah.
title race. I felt Arsenal had to win that game.
Yeah, definitely. I thought we always had that in our mind that Arsenal had to get 3 points from every single game to be anywhere near, and even then they would rely on mistakes from Chelsea, which I don't think were going to happen. So I don't think we can even look at it now. Maybe we was a bit like on the Rene Slager's hype of thinking that at the time, but I don't think we could have ever really looked at it in terms of a title race. I think you've got to now look at the others around you and you've got to capitalise on, for me, Manchester City are the weaker of those. United are building something. They've got the momentum. They seem, they've got I think Tullis Joyce has got the most clean sheets in terms of the
Yeah,
whole league. So they're
unreal.
not they're definitely in a stronger position in my opinion than City are. The City are missing Alex Greenwood and we can definitely go and punish them. For me, I'm thinking I've never been so grateful to play midweek football because Arsenal have to bounce back and this
Yeah.
not we haven't really spoken about that too much, kind of the first loss under Rene, and also what does that mean for Arsenal's kind of mindset, and how do they come back from that and how do they go forward now. And I think playing Bristol City at Meadow Park as well is going to help hugely to get Arsenal back on the right track, to not be disheartened by that defeat under the circumstances, not be frustrated and not let it kind of take them off the path that they're focused on, which Chelsea was always going to be a tough game, but we still have to go out and win every single game now to get top three. So it's something we have to consider, and I think it's going to help playing sort of a bit of rotation, a bit of something different with a home crowd midweek, and then go to Manchester City. And I would have been very scared to go to Manchester City without having that game in between and kind of Arsenal having to just adjust straight away to going back to another big game. And there's so many big games coming up, and how we manage that going forward, I think, is a bigger concern than whether we're ever going to be in a title race this season at all. So, yeah, I hope we can bounce back, and I hope we can. You know what, the fans are like, they'll always get behind the team, but let's do it on the pitch as well.
Mm. Yeah, and obviously, even if Arsenal do beat Chelsea, Arsenal can then win every game for the rest of the season and still
Yeah,
not win the league.
exactly. Yeah.
The damage has been done in this season a long time ago, and I think people I've seen. I think I saw one clip yesterday where maybe people giving Renee Slegers a bit of criticism for the way she handled the game, and obviously that's fine. She can't be immune
Yeah.
to that forever, but Chelsea have got in this position because, like you say. United have defended well, but they haven't set the world on fire. City have
Yeah.
had their own issues. You saw, their blunders and the mistakes they've had, and obviously injuries as well. Arsenal have gone through this managerial change and then has an interim manager in charge for 3 months. So Chelsea are obviously flying away at the top, but the teams behind them, all of them sort of have their own issues in a way. So it is a combination of Chelsea obviously being brilliant, but also
Yeah.
Chelsea haven't been incredible at the
Yeah.
same time. And I think that's the annoying thing is that no one's really been able to maybe capitalize on some of the errors that they've made this season. But I think it's wrong for us to sit here now and go, well, that's it. That's the title over because of that game.
Yeah.
Because I think you can say the title's been over for a long time from an Arsenal perspective. When you look at their start to the season and the fact that we did have a lot more belief. Let's round it up on a positive note. The fact we
Yeah.
believed we could go to Stamford Bridge and cause Chelsea a few more problems. We're in this position where we'd had that unbeaten run, and it took Renee Slagers 3 months for her first defeat as manager. Arsenal, I love the fact as well. She said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to the next time we play Chelsea and to further down the line." Because Arsenal know they're not that far off. But I think just to close out, the next step has to be in the transfer market. I think
Yeah.
for this Arsenal squad to have a chance of progressing and winning things this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you're looking at it from the Chelsea perspective, they have got sort of a cushion now in that they can drop points, which is a luxury. I've talked about the mindset is fantastic that they've been able to do this and go on for her to go unbeaten. And quite frankly, it's scary because she might go unbeaten completely for the whole rest of the season. But they've got that because everyone else has been poor. They've also got that ability now to make mistakes, to draw against the likes of Leicester. Yes, they'll be frustrated, but they'll still be 8, 9, whatever, 7 points clear. So it's absolutely crazy that they're able to be able to do that. But yeah, Arsenal obviously have to keep going now. They have to think about long term is just building a squad and also, building a style of football where we can play against anybody. It doesn't matter if we can put four past Brighton. Can we go to City and get a performance? I thought we performed well yesterday. I want to point that out completely. I feel like we haven't talked about that enough. We did a lot correctly. We had periods of the game where I think we did come to Chelsea and they probably were a bit scared of what we were able to do. We missed a couple of chances. So yeah, there's still so much to build from. It's not all negative. We maybe right of us to be negative in this sense because it was such a huge game, but so much to look forward to. And I actually am also really excited for the next time two female managers at top clubs come up against each other like these two. I like them both. I respect them both. So it's going to be huge. And I think I hate to jump so far into the future, but I'm so excited for next season and obviously give her a transfer window in the summer, see how this season goes, build a good squad, a good tactics, and yeah, we'll see you there next Stamford Bridge next year, or maybe we'll even see you in a final before then, which I think will also be huge for Renee Slagers as well.
Yeah, I think the big picture conversations is really interesting. But
Yeah,
like, say Arsenal have got a new manager in January, we wouldn't be having conversations along this lines. It's only because Renée Segers has come in, taken a bit of time to settle in, and maybe given us this hope that she has been able to turn things around and get Arsenal into a good position. If this was still Jonas Eidevall in charge, then fair enough, people would be going, this really change needs to happen. But Arsenal are back on the right track again
yeah,
towards challenging Chelsea, and I just think, yeah, again, it's not going to happen this season in terms of the league, but there is still so much football to play. There are still, these other competitions and more big games that are going to come as well. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Arsenal doing them. Let's wrap up. That's probably been the longest episode we've done
yeah.
yet.
We're not saying trust the process, but we're saying trust the process with Renee Slagers. Or it's early days, definitely.
Yes, well, certainly looking at our next couple of Guna fanzine
Yeah.
front covers, if you like, not giving too much away, and titles and front covers, we're certainly throwing something of a weight behind Renee Slagers, because obviously I think it was over 100 days I read for her first defeat, so yeah, not bad at all, and
Yeah.
plenty to build on. I'll be at Meadow Park on Wednesday. Isabel Gilligan will be alongside me for the Guna fanzine, which means above all I don't have to do player ratings, which is great. So
Yeah.
looking forward to Isabel joining me for that, and then fingers crossed all accreditation and everything goes through. Then I'll be at Manchester City on the weekend. So all of the usual coverage for both of those. Are you going to be at either, Daisy? You at there?
I will be at both, yeah, both as a fan. I'm looking forward to kind of being back at Meadow Park. I feel like it's been huge this season, and also City away is always a fun one for me. I love my Northern away days, and we'll probably be talking all about that after. So yeah, honestly, it's going to be super fun, and I just hope we can go back to winning ways now and continue to. We always, you should have seen us clapping Renee at the end of that game as well. We've backed the players, the manager. That definitely did not dishearten us at all. I know a lot of people were saying, Renee Sagers, this is not on you. So there's a lot of optimism still amongst the fans, which is great to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to Meadow Park. I think sometimes
Yeah,
you do need a bit of Meadow Park therapy. But Bristol City, I think, have won 7 of their last 9 in the
yeah,
Championship. They're joint top. So also, we've got a
same.
game on our hands on
Yeah,
Wednesday. I've been saying it ever since the draw, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Bristol City come up with. Daisy, we'll leave it there. Chelsea fans, don't clip up anything that we say and don't take the mick too much. We're just doing our job here. And Arsenal fans, hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hope that was just a bit of therapy for you as well. We'll see you next week.
yeah. I'm sorry, Arsenal fans. I feel like we've been a bit too nice to Chelsea this week, but we're back to our usual ways. I'm sure, winding them up as soon as they lose one game. So looking forward to that. Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
and the music was terrible. Let's criticize.
Yeah, sack your
Absolutely
DJ.
terrible. Yeah, I'm sorry because Chelsea have got a great musical history as well. I love the Liquidator. I love playing Park Life and Chelsea Dagger and everything. Purely from a musical point
Yeah.
of view. But Cotton Eye Joe remixed to about 200 BPM. Yeah, no, thank you. So
Yeah,
we'll
and
criticize that.
yeah, and the next time you sign a £1 million defender, maybe stand up and clap her a bit more because she didn't get the reception she deserved. So we've got to finish with a little Chelsea dig for all the Chelsea fans that are still watching. So
There we go. Great stuff as always, Daisy. See you soon.
yeah, see you very soon.